It is not because Oklahoma is on their way, or basically might as well, they're a part of the SEC, a matter of time when the calendar flips this summer. But it's like the one program that I can't tell you much about at all based on spring. Been trying to keep up with updates, and that's why Josh McCuistion, Soonerscoop.com, joins us on 365 Sports. Josh, is that me, or is that maybe a common thought that there's not a lot that people know about OU football right now?
You know, it's one of those things that's interesting because Brent Venables has had one of the most open springs we can remember. Like we've had, I would say 3, 45-minute plus access to, last Friday, the media got to watch some 2-minute drill stuff, stuff that they don't usually let us have a look at. So it's been open, but I think when I listen to people, it's clear that there are a lot of questions because a lot of the names that people have been familiar with are just not in Norman anymore. So I think that is kind of the thing, is that I think there's not really a great starting point to everybody knowing this team and being familiar with it.
Josh, Jackson Arnold, obviously the story, the quarterback, he's going to be the guy. It's the reason that Dylan Gabriel is at Oregon right now. How is he done, and what is plan B after him? Because that seems to be a little bit nebulous.
Yeah, and that's been one of the stories of the spring. Now, Jackson, everybody seems very happy with him. Like you said, there's a reason Dylan Gabriel's in Eugene. Oklahoma made a choice, basically, and, it had to be one or the other. They bought into the future. They bought into a guy that, let's be honest, probably has more upside than Dylan Gabriel. But we all know if Oklahoma was returning with Dylan Gabriel this year, there'd be one less question mark about this team. I mean, that's just what it is. So I think when you look at Jackson, there's been some learning curve. The spring's been a little tough because unlike the last few years, Oklahoma's rebuilding their entire offensive line. So I think it's been tough for him to really just settle in. Like, it would be great if you had all this returning experience in front of him, but you don't have it. And on top of that, Oklahoma's defense looks like it's going to be one of the better units we've seen at Oklahoma in 10 or 15 years. So there's a lot compiling on him, and it's kind of hard to know what that means for the spring, how that relates. But I will say behind him, they kind of got a nice break. Casey Thompson, was at Texas, was at Nebraska, spent last year in Florida. There is, he has transferred in. He's going to be, kind of the veteran savvy guy, kind of one of those things where I think if Oklahoma had to have him in a pinch, he's probably the guy that plays. But what I will say is they've been very, very happy with Michael Hawkins, the guy who, just should be finishing his senior year of high school, but he's really impressed some people here in the spring. Now, again, that's a touch if you must, but I don't think they want to get into that if they don't have to.
Why do you think Venables was so much more open or accessible this spring?
I have some theories on this, and I guess I'm a conspiracy theory guy. There's part of me that thinks kind of like what you were talking about, Smokey, and that it is a situation where Oklahoma is not well known, and especially within the SEC. So, hey, we're going to let you guys see all this stuff from spring, and we're going to let you put it out on YouTube and all these other places, and you can see all these practices, and then we're going to show you nothing like this during the season. Like, that is the feeling I have, like almost like it's a rope-a-dope. Like, here's us running this 4-man front, and here's us doing this blitz package. None of this is going to be valid during the season. Like, I think there is some of that going on, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where I said, Oklahoma, this team may be built around defense. That may be what they really try and rely on this year because they have a lot of depth. Basically, their back seven is as good as it's been in my memory at Oklahoma. It's very, very good, very deep. And the front four, there's some questions, but they have some belief. They have some talent on the edge. So, like I said, I think maybe you're going to see some unique stuff from the new defensive coordinator, Zach Alley. He brings a lot of that Iowa State 3-3-5 background. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of curveballs that none of us got to see in the spring that he's going to throw once they get into SEC play.
Okay, would you admit, or would you, I guess, confirm that it seems like in the last 10 or 15 years, one of the things that has been misdiagnosed, and I'm not saying it is with what you're saying now because we've heard the same thing, but is that the defense was going to be better. And it really has just been frustrating as hell for OU fans.
I would say last year at times it was the defense that kept them in games. And like you look at the two games they lost, Kansas, Oklahoma had turnover problems.
Yep.
They just played poorly on offense, and terrible weather. Like there were some mitigating circumstances that affected the offense there. And then at Oklahoma State, again, Oklahoma's offense just could not consistently play well. And the defense really didn't play that poorly in either of those games. Now, and people will say, well, look at the bowl game. Oklahoma turned the ball over 5-6 times against Arizona. So that defense really held Arizona in check for most of the second and third quarter. And I think by the fourth quarter, the dam just kind of broke. They just couldn't keep bailing out the offense. But I do. Like Billy Bowman, I think you have a legitimate All-American candidate safety. Danny Stutzman, was a Butkus semifinalist last year. I think the hope is that he goes a little step farther this year. And then, you look at some of the guys around them, some big-time recruits. At corner, they've got a lot of experience. So I do think this is going to be different. Now, the degree of the different, I think, is a valid question because we know the SEC, the games are won up front. Just football in general, the games are won up front. And Oklahoma, on the defensive front, has questions. That is the one question about this defense to me.
Josh McCuistion, Soonerscoop.com with us on 365 Sports. So you mentioned it's the SEC, the calendar of the summer. It becomes official, even though technically they're a part of the Big 12. Are Oklahoma fans, and Texas right now seems to have a lot of momentum based on what happened last year and who they have coming back, et cetera. Are Oklahoma fans willing, or do they understand that 10-2 or better may not just be the norm for a little bit, or not?
I think that is going to be a work in progress because I do. I agree. Like I keep trying to explain. I'm like, guys, it's just the margin for error is so much different. There is, like a perfect example. Early in the season, Oklahoma hosts Tennessee. The next week they go to Auburn.
Yep.
And everybody's like, oh, Auburn's, the offense can't score, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, guys, Jordan Hare, that could be a night game. Like, you don't understand that there are not many environments that Oklahoma's played that are like this in the last 10 years. And they're going to be so jacked up. First SEC road game for Oklahoma. The SEC is going to want to, let them know who they are and, kind of put them in their place, that kind of thing. So, it is. It's just one of those deals where, I keep talking about the offense and defensive lines are questions for Oklahoma. I really like the rest of the roster. If you left that offensive line and defensive line in the Big 12, they're viable groups. They're perfectly fine. They're okay. Like, they may not be world beaters, but they're pretty good from a personnel standpoint in the rest of the league. Offensive line's a problem. You're facing NFL draft picks every week, and it's a different level of a problem. And I think people, I don't know that everybody is accepting that yet, and largely because they just don't want to.
It's transfer portal day. It's open now, Josh. How active do you expect Brent Venables to be?
I don't think there's going to be huge activity, but he's been pretty open. They're going to look in the portal, particularly at three positions: offensive tackle, where they took a couple of guys in the winter window. Michael Tarquin, I think right now, if they had to play today, would be their starting left tackle. A guy that started at Florida, ended up at USC last year, and is now at Oklahoma. I think he would be the starting left tackle. That wasn't really what I expected coming in, but he's taken a lot of the reps this spring. So they feel okay there, but at right tackle, I still think they have a lot of questions. I think if they could bring somebody who could push Tarquin out of that spot, they'd be more than happy with that as well. Inside, I think they're pretty happy. The big problem for them is the guy they expected to be their center, Troy Everett, hurt himself during the season, had some sort of knee. It's not a ligament injury, but it's some sort of kneecap or something along those lines. They're hoping he's going to be back by about mid-fall camp, but you can tell they're not sure about it yet. So I think they want to try to find a center. They're bringing in the kid from SMU that's a nice player. This weekend he'll actually be on campus. So those are the two spots on the offensive side. And defensively, like I said, I think it's a defensive tackle. They'd like to find a good, steady player. Doesn't have to be an All-American or anything like that, but just a solid guy who can eat up some reps, because they've got a lot of really good young defensive linemen, but they don't want to throw those guys in the deep end in the start of the season.
Josh, we appreciate your time. It is the SEC coming up, and oh my God, the chat room is. We had Cedric Golden on earlier in the hour on Texas as they wrap theirs up this weekend, and also some Big 12 fans are like, "What in the hell are we doing with this Texas and OU coverage? We're a national college football show too," and so those are going to be programs that we do dip into. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate your time for the information. That's Josh McCuistion, SoonerScoop.com. A little anger, a little bit of